This is Robert Mardlanchi, co-founder and CEO of C21 Canada, and welcome to the C21 Canada Learning podcast series, Accelerating the Changes That Matter for K-12 Learners. And joining me in conversation is Dr. Chris Kennedy, Superintendent of Schools and CEO at West Vancouver Schools, on leadership lessons, celebrating his 20th anniversary. Chris Kennedy, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thanks, Robert. It's good always to connect with you and to talk about where we're going.
Well, a little bit about Chris Kennedy. I should say it's Dr. Chris Kennedy, as he recently got his PhD and is mentioned superintendent and CEO at West Vancouver Schools. He has taught secondary English and social studies, both in the elementary and secondary principal. Before being appointed superintendent, Chris was Deputy Superintendent in West Vancouver Schools. One of the most progressive voices in BC education, Chris has been featured by Maclean's magazine as one of the 100 young Canadians to watch in his work, and has been featured in various local national publications. He was named top 10 newsmakers of the year in EdTech. Kennedy is a writer and presenter and passionate about personalized learning and infusing technology in the classroom. Chris balances his professional passions with his life as the father of 4 children. And you can follow Chris at the Culture of Yes blog and on Twitter at CHR Kennedy. Wow, Chris, 20 years. How does it feel?
Oh, it's really interesting. When you get into administration or school district work at a young age, and I've gone through a generation of people that were my colleagues, and so it was interesting. When I came into school district work, that I was about 20 years younger than everybody, and they've all sort of moved on, and now I have working with a new generation. Super interesting just to see, when you're in the same kind of work for a while, and just to see the shifts in the people that get into the work, and then in the work itself. You get to live a project from inception all the way through to actually carrying it out.
Thank you for that. And if I'm correct, you are one of the youngest superintendents to take on that role when you did 12 years ago.
I was, I guess, 36, 37 when I started as superintendent. And, one of the youngest in the role. And but it's been fun to grow up in the role and, to grow in the role and learn in the role. And, I've got to have a different experience. I think a lot of people get a superintendency sort of in the last 5 years of their career. And I've got to experience I think a really different than most people do.
And on top of that, you've exceeded the average shelf life, because isn't like NHL hockey players, I think it's 4.5 years is their career average. And you've by far exceeded a superintendent role, which I know in the U.S. is about 2 years, and a little longer, probably at least twice that in Canada. So kudos for you. Clearly, you're doing something right. What is your secret to longevity in the role and in making an impact as an education leader?
Yeah. So a couple things with that. I think yes, I've been in the role a long time, but I've always had a view of trying to keeping it fresh. Using that sports analogy, after a few years, you don't change the players, so you got to change the coach. And but there are examples of coaches who can carry on. And I think those are the ones that continue to adapt and change. And I think the best thing I've done is I've continued to surround myself with a team that is interesting and challenges me and is really smart. And that if you're going to stay in the position, it's just crucial that you get people as your senior leaders around you who are going to keep pushing the organization forward. Because absolutely, it's easy in the job after a while to just, let's do next year just like we did this year. So you need others, I think, sometimes to prod you a little bit to go, no, we got to grow. There's stuff we can do.
My next question is around leadership and who inspired you. And is it a coincidence, or could this be an interesting doctoral study that, I'm thinking of doing my PhD, and you've very much been an inspiration, is some of the top leaders that I've met have had a sports background and been involved in team sports as part of their, evolution?
Yeah, so it's interesting the sports piece because for a while I kind of almost I was hiding my coaching background because there was a perception that you're a sports coach. Oh, it's just that what do you know? And the last thing we need
Right.
is another basketball coach, being the principal or running the school district. But as I became more comfortable and over time, I've really embraced it because I think so many of the skills that I honed coaching and still do coaching are ones that I apply all the time. That sort of a building of team, of setting up,
Right.
having a common purpose. That all of those skills that as a coach, same ones we use as a teacher, same ones I think we use in these
Right.
district jobs.
Absolutely. And those 7 C's that we talk about at C21 Canada that you're part of certainly come into play. And it's never been a more critical time as, our youth are facing a future that isn't, totally clear. I mean, the complexities today of navigating and figuring out what you might want to do for a living as a student. And oftentimes you have to declare your pathway, grade 9 or 10. And it's not an easy thing, but the more, I guess, pliable or resilient and have those grounded skills that we talk about, from critical thinking to digital skills and problem solving skills, are really coming of age, I would say, today.
Yeah, and I think all that we can do as leaders to model that for our students, the more comfortable we can sort of be in that discomfort of change and those, and I think it's great modeling when we can say as leaders, I used to think this, but now I think this. That it's not a sign of weakness anymore to evolve your thinking. I mean, it's not a sign that you just because you have a different thought now doesn't mean you were wrong before. That that you adapt and change as the world changes around you. I think the more that students can see teachers and school administrators and district administrators, be thoughtful and change as the world changes. I think that's what we need to do. Robert, I lost you on the mic.
Talk to me about mentorship and transformation. We have seen a tremendous turnover in leaders in your role across the country. And, there's been a bit of a leadership vacuum it's been talked about. Talk to me about the importance of mentorship and some of the influencers and what influenced you along the way.
Yeah, for sure. I feel so lucky. I actually look back, one of the reasons I got into school administration and district administration was even as a student, I had such admiration and respect for the principals in my schools. And so the fact I can think of, my elementary, vice principal, Mr. Taylor, and then my high school principal, Mr. Campbell, and these people who were super influential for me as a student, I go, I'd love to make a difference the way they make a difference. And then when I got into teaching, I had like a couple principals back to back early in my career, Gail Semanek and Kent Chappell, who were so good. And a little bit of that is luck where you end up, but absolutely, I was inspired to get into this kind of work because from a young age, I saw people making a huge difference in this work. And so I don't think we can underestimate that, if we want the best leaders and the best people going into leadership, we have to have people there to inspire them and for them to see, this is the possible differences you can make when you get into these jobs.
Talk to me about your leadership style and how it's evolved and how it's been influenced by the many memberships and associations you have, locally, provincially, and nationally.
Yeah, Robert, I really think of myself as like a network leader, that I try to, I do my best to soak up the best ideas. And I think one of the things that's done me well is I'm always out there looking for what other people are doing and taking their ideas and then making them make sense in West Vancouver. And so whether that's local superintendents who I admire, whether, there's a lot out there right now, Doug Shepard in Delta and Dave Eberwin in Saanich are two that come to mind immediately, or if there's superintendents across the country. I think about how influential someone like John Malloy was to me when he was in Toronto, and just being able to see what he was trying to do there in that district, and so many others, and then even American colleagues. It's a different context, but they've been really influential in sort of my thinking. And so taking that best and staying connected to them, and then figuring out how can I take that work and make it make sense here. And then if I was to identify sort of like the one shift in my leadership, I think early in my career, it was more important to me to be out front sometimes, because I wanted to show I was doing the work. And especially when you're young and you get the job, you want to prove yourself all the time. Like I felt every day I had to convince people I deserved the job. And so I'm still as passionate and inspired by the work, but like I'm so much more comfortable being in the background than I used to be around the work, because I let the work stand for itself. And I'm not, because I have that credibility of time in, I'm not worried what people are thinking about, is Chris a good leader? Where's Chris on this? Because, if the work's there, that's what matters now. And so I've really noticed that shift in myself in the last, by being in this role for such a long time.
And you're active with the CEO Academy at C21. Talk to me about that organization and how that's impacted your leadership evolution.
Yeah, so one of the really nice things about C21 is that there are very few places where you get to have a cross-Canada conversation. And Canada is so unique by having education as provincial jurisdiction that we are far more siloed than so many countries. And so it's really necessary, I think, because there are cross-Canadian values and cross-Canadian ideals that we're trying to meet. And when we think of the future workforce and the future citizenship, well, those are Canadian ideals that we're trying to hit. But education is provincial. And so the power of C21 is that you network together people from across the country. The work that we're trying to do around Indigenous education is the same kind of work that's happening in Manitoba and Nova Scotia. So why shouldn't we be having conversations about it?
Well said. And so as an innovator, blogger, and tech-savvy superintendent, probably one of the most tech-savvy I know, what is your philosophy around and expectations for district leaders and your leaders and teachers in helping prepare our next generation of students?
We do talk a lot about modern learning and about the whether those are the 7 C's and the future ready skills and those pieces that we want. Like I guess I always like, it's okay to be where you are. It's just not okay to stay there. And so I'm more interested in sort of that growth or a growing organization and like
Yes, I remember I told them, and it was, they didn't want to sponsor us, they wanted us to do an ad in there. Yeah. And then we do nice.
Just froze up. Am I frozen or is he frozen?
And of course, this guy was instruction guy.
I don't want to miss. Do I refresh or? Okay, so we appear frozen. Technology is great when it works. Oh, I lost them. So, okay, so we'll just take a pause here while we get Dr. Chris Kennedy back in conversation, as we lost him midstream. He does come from afar on this connection in West Vancouver. And so I'm anticipating that he'll be back. And there he is. Welcome back.
Thanks, Robert. I think I was just in the middle of talking about the power of technology. I think when I
how ironic. I'll share a quick little story on that note. A superintendent from Texas I met at FETC last year talked to me about the innovation around solving a rural internet challenge. He was urban and rural, and he partnered with Elon Musk and Starlink to have a satellite hover over his district to deliver consistent bandwidth. So I'm just giving you a little tip on that, and because it seemed with lost you, I'm not sure. That's a long way to come across the country. So
I guess I got to get a hold of Elon to see what we can do.
That's right. Just maybe you can tweet at him.
Yeah.
So you were talking about, so innovation, it's not okay to stay where you're at. It's that
Yeah.
growth mindset around modern learning. Um, so did you want to finish up? Did you finish up your thought on that?
Yeah, just I think I think the pandemic had some shifts in terms of the of ramping up the technical skills, and I think really important that we capture that now that we have staff with more technical skills, that the pedagogical practices that are aligned to those the digital tools, and supporting staff around that right now is really important.
So one of the challenge in some parts of Canada, like Ontario, Dr. Steve Jordan's talked about the great snapback and how to mitigate that, with teachers going back in the classroom and tending to want to go back to the old way of teaching and learning. I sense that BC didn't experience that challenge as much as we did here in the East.
Robert, I'm not seeing the snapback like I've heard in other places. I think there are I see like elements of the last 3 years, the stuff that people are holding on to because it was powerful and shifted. I think about how we're thinking differently about time in our high schools and giving kids more flexible time, or or we're looking at how we offer courses in blended or hybrid formats in different ways than we did pre-pandemic. I don't see us snapping back. I see us learning lessons, and so feeling super fortunate that that's happening here.
You are an avid keynoter, presenter, blogger extraordinaire. What inspired that? And one of the things I discovered in my travels is that when you're sharing and speaking, it's a reciprocal learning process. And some of the best superintendents I know, top superintendents, are out there, put themselves out there to share their story.
I got into blogging because I wanted to be really transparent. I didn't think people understood what the role of the district or district superintendent was. I wanted to just be, take away those walls and show, hey, this is what I'm thinking, or this is what we're doing, and also, open it up as a dialogue. And like, absolutely, when I write, not because I know something, but because I'm interested in something and I'm curious around the ideas, and starting and generating conversations. Like it's not the old way was you would write an article because you had a thing that you wanted to tell people. I want to open up a conversation around it. And like, best thing I've done as superintendent is blogging and being disciplined about blogging regularly and pushing ideas out there. Like, these are conversations. If we don't initiate these conversations, when and where are we going to have them? And so like, I think that for leaders, for me, the blogging is the venue. Others do it different ways, but like, I found that so valuable.
Fascinating. It's a great segue to your recent blogging around Chat GPT and your thinking around that. We've embraced it. We have a press release we're writing, and I kind of laid out what the focus is, and it generated a press release. So there is critical thinking involved in problem solving and demonstrating your knowledge. Talk to me about, give me a kind of 30-foot view on your perspective and what some of the feedback's been like.
Locally really good, and people are curious. And I think I'm more excited about Chat GPT than I've been around any technology, really since the Web 2.0 days, early Web 2.0 days, because I feel this is transformative, and it's shaking the system a little bit, and that's really healthy. And like, I think Chat GPT is just our beginning of AI and what that will look like. And so I just think, I don't know how much we should use in classrooms or how regularly, but like, I think we should be engaging with it. And if we're not teaching kids about it, where are they learning about it? And that's we got to step into that space. That's what we are. That's what schools and teachers and classrooms. That's what we do.
Well said. And as we come near the end of this conversation, I wanted to get a sense from you in terms of the growth mindset. Having recently completed your PhD, what instilled the growth mindset in you. For me, my grade 12 teacher, English teacher, Mrs. Fogarty, wrote in my yearbook, the only sign of life is growth, and drew a little flower. And I read that over a few times after she wrote it. And I'm like, is she worried about me? What is she trying to tell me? So as I reflect back, that really made an impact. It goes to show the power of words, the power and potential what teachers can make on a student's life.
A couple of things. One is I was inspired by people around me who had also gone to get their doctorates, other administrators who had done that, and people I admired. And then I like the challenge of the discipline. I try to as I've gotten older, I've tried to be more disciplined in things in my life, and the discipline of having to write and learn every day is hard. And like
Right.
I liked going through that process, and it makes you empathetic to what we're trying to do in schools. Like and we're always learners, right? All of that.
Right. Brilliant. And so, talk to me about some of your key initiatives in West Vancouver School Division in 2023 to support and nurture student success.
I highlight three. And so, every district has what are the sort of the elements of the next wave of education. Number one for us is robotics. We are all in on competitive robotics. We have hundreds of kids participating.
Amazing.
I think it teaches all those 7 C's in skills and using tools that are the cutting edge. Second one is physical literacy. That while one is all about technology, the other one is all about being active. We need kids who have those motor skills to be lifelong being active and physical. And the third one is to work around Indigenous education and for some that more broadly on equity, diversity, and inclusivity. But I think the most what we're doing with our local Squamish Nation here, what we're trying to do around having an Indigenous focused grad requirement in BC. Like, this is super important work. This is the the reset of our system in some ways. And so I think the combination of those three, all really exciting as school looks so much different than even 10 years ago.
Those three are so brilliant. I've not heard the term physical literacy yet. I really love it, and I embrace it. I played Wednesday morning hockey at 7 a.m. this morning.
Yeah.
So I'm skating 3 times a week. It's part of my DNA. It's part of my lifestyle. And, when you are active, it really supports and helps your well-being and mindset. And it makes you a better learner, I believe, with the adequate amount of sleep.
Yeah, right.
That sometimes is a challenge. But talk to me about a technology. You talked about ChatGPT, and I concur. I think it's one of the most transformational platforms. AI hadn't been fully, the potential hadn't been fully realized, and I think we're going to be going down that path this year as we released our top 10 EdTech trends. And talk to me about a technology that you can't do without in a normal day of work.
Yeah. So, I think obviously, the new one is ChatGPT, and sort of I'm using it every day. The other one I'll tell you about is I couldn't live without wearable technology anymore. I know that's not as professionally focused, but I have now greater ownership over all my health than I ever did in my life. And I'm really into wearable. I'm really interested in how we better use wearable technologies in schools too. And, I think whether that's in PE classes or elsewhere, I think the future of health and the connection pieces maybe with education, I think whether that's Fitbits and Apple Watches and whatever that we're the next generation and you combine that with AI, that's all really exciting to me right now.
Well, coincidentally, I've just been asked to be part of a startup called Immortal that's focused on health tech and helping people live in a healthy way to 100. So stay tuned for more on that.
I need those answers.
Absolutely. With that, Dr. Chris Kennedy, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Well, thanks, Robert. Always a good conversation.
Well, congratulations again on your 20th anniversary. That was Dr. Chris Kennedy, Superintendent and CEO of West Vancouver School District. My name is Robert Martlanchi, co-founder and CEO of C21 Canada. Be sure to check out c21canada.org to get more resources about the 7 C's and other publications on the future skills generation. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.